Hey there, athletes. Coach John Ferry here from Team Wilpers. Very excited to welcome you to our Week 5 athlete briefing for our Summer Send-Off Challenge. We will be returning to our normally scheduled briefing here in the weeks to follow, so just FYI, this upcoming Friday we'll be back to our usual time at 6 o'clock Eastern. Thanks so much again for being patient with some of my personal travel. So quick review of week 4, where we are right now. So this week was all about pulling back. Want to make sure those workouts were staying aerobic, and we're really trying to get ready and rested to be able to hammer in the upcoming couple weeks. So I hope, one, that you very much enjoyed that kind of downtime and that pullback, and two, is that you're really committed to it so you get the benefit out of this week 4 here before we jump into was a little bit of a challenging week 5. So just as a reminder, as always, continue to keep going onto that portal, checking the box, chasing that 100% completion percentage. So I know I mentioned that there would be some winners of some Team Wilper swag for people maintaining that 100%. I do have some of those names. They were just sent to me not too long ago. I've just been a little pokey posting them. So I expect tomorrow to be posting some names of people who are maintaining 100% completion percentages. We're going to start getting some Team Wilpers gear in the mail headed your way. So something to be chasing, something to look forward to, hopefully. So our week 5 workouts here. So we're going to start the week with what I kind of titled our Canova style interval. So this is going to be a style of workout and a type of workout which I kind of expected a lot of people would not be familiar with. The gist of this workout is really to move from a half marathon pace to marathon pace back and forth without the recovery. So common to do segments of half marathon pace or marathon pace, and we've done a lot in this challenge, and we'll take little recoveries between each one to go into it. What we're trying to do right now is to string those things together in relatively large chunks so that you can kind of, one, spend a lot of time with zone 3 training, but also have the ability to kind of understand what it feels like to recover at marathon pace. This is going to be super useful to kind of learn how to make pacing adjustments and corrections in the scope of still kind of a challenging set. So I'm sure I'm not alone, and someone that's probably been a little bit too fast and realized you're a little bit too fast in your race. And when you do that, you don't go back down to easy pace, or hopefully you don't have to go all the way back down to easy pace to recover. You're trying to adjust your pace slightly, kind of come back down to where you want it to be. And in doing so, hopefully you can settle back in. So we're practicing that here in this Canova style workout of trying to kind of find a way to recover at still an advanced kind of zone 3 pace. So the full version of this workout, so if you select like the difficulty version up, and the way that the workout was first introduced to me is there's no recovery at all. It's just a long set varying between half marathon and marathon pace. And usually it'll break down, and I'm most familiar with it in just kilometer repeats, so kilometer on, kilometer off. And you're usually somewhere between like 10 and 14 kilometers, just alternating back and forth at that pace. So that's pretty advanced workout. And on the difficult setting, I took that 4-minute break out. But for most athletes this week, we're going to keep that recovery in there to make it a little bit more approachable, a little bit more doable. Because as I mentioned, that full Canova style workout is a pretty advanced one. So we'll get a nice taste. It'll be super functional, really beneficial. Like I said, ton of zone 3 training time. Great practice, varying paces, but without having to take it all the way to that most advanced level. Second key workout of this week, our hill workout. So this is the second hill workout of this challenge, but a very different workout than the first time around. So workout 1 was all easy pace. It was really an endurance themed workout. We included the incline to get a little bit of recruitment of the posterior chain to add a little bit of challenging, but I very much hoped that you would remain aerobic during that workout. However, in this workout, we're going to add faster paces, and we're going to be adding a little bit of intensity on these repeats. So what we're looking to do here is really build power with that increase of intensity. We get to kind of add a little bit of extra oomph, if you will, really firing off your feet. We're looking to increase leg strength. Once again, we're going to do this at accelerated pace based upon just easy running on hills. We want to continue recruiting the muscles of the posterior chain. One more time, it's the harder you're doing it, the more that you have to really engage that, the less that you can kind of pull muscles that we don't want designed to kind of power you up that hill. But as opposed to week one, this is no longer going to be an kind of aerobic endurance-based workout. This is something that really should kind of get your heart rate up, be a little bit huffy puffy. So my hunch is that you'll probably end up somewhere in that kind of zone 3, low zone 4 if you're tracking. So it's just going to be a little bit higher intensity than our first time through all around. And then as always, we finish the week with our endurance run. Hopefully this is just nice and easy, start to finish. Certainly a great one. Take outside, get a friend involved, have some fun with it. So we'll jump straight into some questions now that came up from the group. So questions about downhill running. This came from Christy, who I understand is at the Vikings game right now, so she'll have to catch this later, but wanted to answer the questions on downhill running. Certainly something that comes up a lot. And kind of what she mentioned was, so you want to be able to capitalize on downhill sections of your race. However, there's absolutely the opportunity in races, especially long races, in overtaxing your quads, calves, etc., by kind of doing the hill running a little bit incorrectly, if we will. I don't love the term incorrectly, but we'll say inefficiently. So some things to be mindful about for downhill running is that it's crucial to keep your cadence high. So what people have a tendency to do when they start going downhill, there's kind of one of two things. The first thing would be to really overstride. As you get this long loping leg motion, you're really trying to let gravity pull you down the hill there. And so you not only are kind of losing a little bit of speed because you generate the speed from the power of your foot hitting the ground and pushing off. So you're actually losing a little bit of speed, even though it feels like you're elongating, going a little bit of fast. You're taking added impact on every single footfall. So when you eliminate those amount of footfalls per minute, you're putting more impact on every footfall, and especially on a decline surface, it's going to be more impactful. So you're going to really be taking, feet, ankle, calves, quads are really going to get beat up, especially if you have a lot of incline and decline on your run. The second thing that people do, you want to be thoughtful about not really doing, is leaning back. So if you start to kind of lean back, landing really heavy in the heels, what you're doing is called heel braking, where you're actually stopping your acceleration going down the hill. You're using your legs and your muscles to slow your momentum. So once again, this is especially taxing on your muscles and joints. And so what you want to do when you're kind of coming down the hill is you actually kind of want to be pretty straight up, maybe even just a little bit of forward tilt. So if you think about even on flat, we kind of talk about running as the act of controlled falling. So while you don't want to actually fall all the way over, obviously running down the hill, you do want to be kind of on the mid part of your foot. Unlikely that you're all the way forward on your toes, that some people might be running on flat, especially on a track, but very much on the mid part of your foot. So keeping that cadence high will really help that. If you can eliminate that long loping stride, make sure your turnover is staying similar to what it would be on a flat road. It's not going to allow you to get way out long where you're really heel braking. Also, once again, hopefully not going to allow you to be tipping down the hill and sliding down the rest of the way, which we want to avoid. So, if you're kind of tall, standing forward a little bit, keeping cadence really high, and then the second thing, or kind of maybe the third thing on that list there, is just to be really thoughtful about the impact of your foot on the ground. So this is an instance where I really encourage people to take headphones out, especially if you're practicing this in a workout. You want to be listening to the sound that your foot is making hitting the ground. If it sounds super impactful and loud and hard, then most likely it is super impactful, loud and hard. So if you can be very thoughtful about quick contact time with the ground, soft landing, think about landing on eggshell, landing on glass sort of scenario where you're turning your feet over often without that heavy impact. And this is something that you can control, and especially with practice, that's going to really help both probably your speed down the hill, but also the impact that it imparts on your body, because then you have to carry that along with you for the rest of the race. So the final thing I was going to say here is you have to practice. So it's going to be tough if you only run on flat or only run inside to all of a sudden get on incline or decline and be pretty adept at running that. Is you have to, even if you're a flat lander, find some areas with at least a gentle decline to practice kind of running, not only running easy, but running hard on decline. It is a skill, just like many other things, that is acquired with repetition. So especially if you have a hilly race, so those out there, we're not far off from marathon season here. So New York City, absolutely. Pittsburgh's not the spring, but that's a pretty hilly one. If you've got some of these hilly races, make sure you're practicing on hills as best as possible. Even if you've got to go out of your way to get there, it's going to make a big difference. Hopefully that helps. So we'll go on to our next question here, which is, I have stray aches and pains, took most of the week to rest and recover. This was the right call, but now I'm feeling unmotivated. Any tips to get motivated again? So first of all, if you took some time off and you're feeling better, then great. However, it's actually incredibly rare that I recommend an athlete take full rest in order to recover. So what I would probably do instead is like pivot them to either lighter workouts, lighter cross training, extra strength training, extra mobility training, whatever it might be. And the reason being is that the schedule, the routine that we find ourselves in, hopefully, is probably one of the hardest things to make and one of the easiest things to break. So it sounds like you're feeling it right now, which is as soon as you kind of get off of the routine, it's very hard to break back in. So for next time, maybe consider just keeping the schedule, filling it with something a little bit different, but without taking the full rest. And so once that motivation kind of falls off, once you're like kind of in the rut and you need a bit of a rut buster, you kind of have to recommit to scheduling that workout. So block the time off in your calendar. So if you're waiting to find motivation in your day, you might be waiting a while. If all of a sudden you have the first hour and a half of your day blocked off and that's the time in which you're doing the workout, it's just get up and do the workout. Once you've kind of devoted that time to yourself, it will be easier once you kind of get back into starting. Feel free to make it a little bit easier on yourself. I find it incredibly difficult to jump straight back into really hard structured training. So when I'm coming back, as I am personally now after some time traveling, I'm absolutely not coming back into my hardest, toughest workouts. I'll probably spend a week, 2 weeks, maybe 3 or 4 weeks just with easy running, kind of getting that back into a routine. Always certainly find someone to be accountable to. So make a plan to work out with a friend. If you don't have a friend available, go on to the Facebook group here, post the time that you plan to work out, see if somebody will at least keep you accountable to holding that schedule. Finding accountability partners, whether locally or virtually, is a super powerful way to stay accountable. And then if all else fails, perhaps a little bit of fear will help, which usually for about a week off of training takes about 2 weeks to get back to where you left off, 2 weeks training, 4 weeks. So that becomes a slippery slope as you can do some pretty quick, easy math. So that certainly will get me back in the gym, back on the track, is I don't want to have to come back and spend all that time getting back to where I left off. I want to be getting better and advancing. So maybe a little bit of fear, if nothing else. Our next question here was, any suggestions on planning out a training over the course of the year? I was aiming to do a 10K in October, Seattle half marathon, which is end of November. So I shortened this question a little bit. And basically the point that I wanted to bring, I think the question I wanted to bring as well, is kind of what do you do coming into the winter months, the rest of the year, based upon that schedule? And so you have to periodize the year. And in one of the All Access briefings with Coach Justin Harris a couple of weeks ago, we talked a lot about this. But you do not want to be doing the same training year-round either. So see this all the time, in particular with endurance athletes and the marathoners. We go marathon to marathon to marathon to marathon. And when you start backing these marathon training cycles out, they're 6 months long usually. So you do 2 key marathons a year. That's your whole training year. That was all you did. What happens if you do that year after year after year after year is you just stop progressing, right? And I think plenty of people have seen this, once again, especially half marathons, just kind of hit the same time year after year. And the reason is you're not doing anything different. So your body stops adapting. Maybe it's getting a little bit more efficiency, but you got to take these off seasons. You got to kind of change the dynamic a little bit. So if you're racing a 10K in October and a half marathon in November, this is a great time to take an off season over the winter to work on short speed, to be working on more strength training, more cross training, heavier weightlifting, adding volume, etc. And the kind of part B to it is you have to be thoughtful about what are your goals for 2024, because that training, those things, that starts in that off season there. So in addition, what are the things you're good at versus the things you really struggle at? Those are your considerations. So if you've got high speed, if you're a fast mile runner, a fast 5K runner, but short on endurance, and you're planning on a spring marathon, it doesn't necessarily make sense to jump straight into a speed cycle at the end of your half marathon. You probably want to spend some time, maybe 2-3 months, doing nothing but base building, getting your base mileage to a higher level so you'll be more prepared for marathon training. If you don't have any particular goal race for a lot of months, that speed training might work. And also on the flip side, if you're a lifelong endurance runner and you feel good with the distance of 10K, half marathon, marathon, etc., but you're not finding the speed, you're not finding the performance increase that you're looking for, great opportunity to maybe back off your mileage just a little bit, really jump into some of those faster paces that you're not touching in especially marathon training. Very few people are hitting like high pace in marathon training, so it wouldn't be uncommon. As a matter of fact, it would be common to lose short distance speed in favor of endurance in a long marathon cycle. So go back and find that there. So point being, you have to really think about what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, what comes next. Really start reverse engineering when you need to start preparing for the next thing. Find that amount of time in between where you can really change up the dynamic of your training cycle. Our next question here was, based on the 20-minute test, my marathon, half marathon, and threshold pace are all within 40 seconds of each other. I'm pretty confident I could do a half marathon at that pace, but no way I could run a marathon at that pace. And I could probably run a 10K faster than threshold pace. So could you explain what's behind the training pace calculations? So yes. And so overall, everything is based upon a percentage of threshold, all of the paces that we kind of spit out for you. So in performing the 20-minute test, you not only are kind of establishing a baseline for yourself, we're using that metric to actually try to solve for threshold. So I've talked about this a little bit in the past, and I'm sure someone out there will remember. 20-minute test is not actually a great test for threshold. 30-minute test is a much better threshold test. But because nobody wants to do a 30-minute max effort test, we tried to recreate it a little bit with a 20-minute test and then use a factor to solve for threshold, very similar to how people do on a traditional cycling FTP test. So for marathon pace, half marathon pace, etc., these are percentage of threshold paces kind of based on a large amount of athletes. So they're a bit of an approximate. So for race lengths, especially of marathon, half marathon, etc., the further the race distance is from the test distance, the less applicable of the test, if you will. What I mean by that is it really becomes dependent upon the training. 20-minute test is going to actually probably be a pretty great kind of tester for 5K pacing, because you're going to be relatively close within a ballpark of how long it takes to run a 5K, or paces that are very similar. The test is a VO2 max test. 5K is almost definitely a VO2 max race, so that's pretty close. But when you're thinking about half marathon, marathon, etc., so much training goes into it. So, I think I've talked about once again in the past, the best test, if you're trying to find real marathon pace, is to run a half marathon, relatively close to the marathon itself. It's going to give you a much better indicator than just a 20-minute test. However, both of these paces remain excellent pace targets. So while it may or may not be the exact pace that you run in a race, it is most likely going to put you exactly where we want on an energy zone perspective, which is kind of ranges of zone 3, maybe even touching on a little bit of low zone 4 there. So for pace targets, these are exactly where you want to be. Once again, whether or not it's the exact race pace, TBD. For 10K, my threshold pace is definitely, or my 10K pace is going to be much faster than my threshold pace. What we have to think about there is that threshold is the pace in which you can hold for 1 hour of at maximum. So if you're a 10Ker and can run a 10K faster than an hour, your 10K pace is going to be much faster than threshold. If you are someone that runs a 10K in less than an hour or more than an hour, your threshold is going to be a little bit faster than your 10K, which is fine. What I would say the threshold does give you is a pretty decent guideline if you're not familiar with your 10K racing of potentially how you would start. So one more time, if you're kind of averaging, can't think of the exact math right now, but around 10 minutes a mile for your 10K racing or higher, you're going to adjust a little bit slower than threshold, but probably not all the way to half marathon pace. If you're on the flip side of it and you expect to finish your 10K in less than an hour, take threshold, make it a little bit faster, and kind of put that pace in between threshold and maybe interval pace, which would be a little bit higher, certainly a faster percentage there. So hopefully that helps find 10K pace a little bit, and hopefully explains kind of what we're doing with our pacing calculator here, which is really trying to find energy zone targets and pace targets that we want you to do in the scope of the workout itself. Well, ladies and gents, that is all here for week 5. So I hope you have an incredible week, and I can't wait to see you back here Friday at 6 o'clock for next time. Have a good one.